Absolutely, yes. So my name is Oliver Ballhatchet, and I'm the newish British Deputy High Commissioner here in Chennai. I've been here for 2 months and 2 days, to be precise. We're loving the city, yes. There is fantastic food, the weather is lovely and warm, we're near the beach, the people are extremely friendly, there's plenty to do in Chennai, and so it's quite easy to acclimatise here. I have a daughter and a son. So I have yes, my daughter was born in Brazil and my son was born here in Chennai 3 weeks ago. Yeah, well, and one thing I have tried to embrace is the traditional dress. Yes. So I went to an event the first weekend I came in a dhoti, and after 10 minutes of walking in the room, I won the Best Dressed Man award, and I've started to develop quite a collection of kurtas as well, and the jackets. Sure. So we at the British Deputy High Commission here in Chennai carry out a number of different functions. One, of course, is known to many people, which is our visa operation. We issue visas here in Chennai. Others, we have a trade section, which is people who are helping cultivate business between India and the UK. We have what we call a prosperity section, which is to work on policy issues. So, for example, we worked recently with Tamil Nadu state government on their electric vehicle policy. And we have a consular section, which are the people who look after British nationals who are over here and maybe in distress, maybe have lost their passports or have become unwell, that sort of thing. And then we have our communication section, we have our political section where we monitor the political situation and explain the situation from the UK, which is of course very topical at the moment. So a number of different things that we do here. Well, of course, my job is to sell the UK rather than Chennai, and including my hometown of Windsor, where I was born, where of course the Queen lives in the castle there. But of course, I'm gonna be selling Chennai to friends and family who I want to come and visit, and I'll tell them that actually, if you scratch beneath the surface of Chennai, there's a lot to see. We talked about the Mousetrap and the wonderful theatre there. I didn't know that existed. That was great. So I'll be looking at performances that are going to be there. Of course, there's the fantastic sporting events that happen here, including the cricket, and I've noticed quite a lot of bookshops and book cafes around the city as well. So I'll be looking to find things to encourage my family to come and visit. Clearly, Tamil Nadu is the home to many important industries like the automotive sector and healthcare. I think it produces most of the leather, for example, textiles, all of these traditional kind of industries, and they are of course very interesting to us because British companies supply the supply chains to lots of these, or our markets in one direction or another. But of course, then you've got the more modern kind of industries like tech or renewable energies, and those are, robotics, and those are things that are extremely interesting for us too, and areas where we can really cultivate new partnerships. So rather than being transactional, we can work on these innovations together, I believe. We talked about climate change and renewable energy, and is one of the solutions to that, and it's something I think we can work in partnership with India on. But electric vehicles are very close to my heart. I've actually just bought a pure electric vehicle. Yes, it's unfortunately not a British car. It's a Hyundai Kona, but it's one of the first fully electric vehicles on the market here. So I'm waiting for that to be delivered, and then we're hoping, as an office, to buy a Jaguar I-Pace electric vehicle, which does of course have a British connection next year. So we're hoping to move to electric and an electric fleet for our vehicles in the next few years. Watching cricket in England is usually a more sober affair. You sit there with your book and your newspaper and your sandwiches, and then occasionally, particularly in test matches when they get very tense at the end, or during the World Cup this year we saw in London, it can get quite it can get quite animated. But here in India, it seems to be from ball one, in any game you go and watch, everybody's on their feet dancing and cheering and singing and playing their hooters. So I'm really looking forward to it. What I love about India actually is that you have maintained some of the old expressions that we don't say anymore. None of them come to mind at the moment, but the way of talking, it kind of conjures up the way people spoke, perhaps in my childhood or even before that. But yeah, the comedy, you're not the first person who's mentioned Yes, Prime Minister. We had a lot of those. Faulty Towers was another famous one at the time. The Monty Python series. The Life of Brian was controversial at the time, of course, but I thought they were hilarious growing up. Yeah, that would be good, wouldn't it? Maybe we could celebrate some of the old some of the old sitcoms, the old classic sitcoms and movies. Maybe we should start showing some here. I think there's a lot of comparisons actually between Brazil and India. They're both big countries that have that are like archipelagos in a way. They are one country, but their cities are very different. So the people of Sao Paulo and Rio are very different people, in the same way that the people from the south are very different from the people from the north here, and even between cities in the south, people are very different. And so you've got that. You've got their obsession with sport. Here it's cricket and there it's football. They both have wonderful biodiversity, and in that sense they're both extremely important for the future of the planet, and very important in the climate change debate, of course. And then, of course, the carnivals. Yeah, and it's a coincidence that my daughter was born during Rio Carnival in Rio, and my son was born during Diwali here in. So we have some carnival babies. But I think there's a lot of similarities between the two countries, albeit they're very different as well. The question about actually the current affairs that I'm following at the moment, yeah. So I think it seems to be a very interesting time at the moment for the world, in the US, in the UK, in India, and across the world. Politics is as energized as ever, it seems, and we seem to be as divided as we've ever been before. Now, I don't know whether that's reality or perception, and I don't know whether it's being pushed by social media or what it is that's causing it, but I think that we're losing the ability to listen to each other. I think we're getting very good at talking and posting and publishing, but we're not doing very well at listening to other people. And I think that, I believe that there are no unreasonable people. And what I mean by that is that everybody has a reason for the way that they behave or for their beliefs. And I think that if we did more to try to understand those and have more debates instead of arguments, because an argument is basically shouting your opinion and hoping that the other person understands it. Whereas if we have some more discussions where you're actually listening as well as talking, then we may get ourselves out of this situation. But it's worrying to me, the direction that we're going in at the moment, where everybody is so polarized, both at the top of politics and down in the street. It's an irony, isn't it? Because I think we thought when we had greater access to information that it would make us smarter, and it has empowered us. But it's empowered everybody to now start to put out information and opinion. And what it means is that we're saturated. And when you're saturated, you have a very short attention span. And when you have a short attention span, people can then edit to try to capture that attention span. And when they edit, they distort the facts, they distort meaning, they take out the context, and when we are kind of editing, we can then choose to talk in our own echo chamber and not listen to others. So actually, when we had less access to information, and when we were able to listen to people talk about their thoughts and their decisions and the reasons behind their decisions, and we gave them time to explain. Yes, you have debate. You know, we've had debate in Parliament. Your Parliament, our Parliament have been shouting at each other for decades. And that's absolutely fine. But they were given time, and they were given time to talk, and then people were listening because their attention was on that person. Now everybody's attention's all over the place, and it's not good. And I don't know whether we're going to come through it. I mean, we're at such a nascent stage, aren't we, when it comes to social media? And I mean, we are a millisecond into the kind of this stage in our development. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah. In terms of evolution, we are 1 second past midnight. So we'll see how it goes. I've started to tweet because I've now got things to tweet about. I wasn't doing it before because I didn't want to do it for the sake of it. And partly because of what I was talking about. I think we should. I didn't want to be part of this saturation without having anything meaningful to add to the conversation. But now I'm the British representative in Tamil Nadu and Puducherry. I've got some things. I've got some things to say now, and people are interested in them. So I've started to tweet. Yeah. And also, I mean, the other thing about social media is that it allows some kind of false equivalence. You know, when it comes to climate change, where 97% or more of the scientists around the world agree that the climate is changing and that humans are largely responsible, there's no debate anymore. But social media would have you believe that there is still a debate, but there isn't really. I mean, there are some scientists, the 3%, who might say yes, the climate is changing, but they might disagree about human beings. Absolutely, and that's something, of course, that's important to us. And it's interesting that architects are now sort of looking back to nature and seeing how anthills remain ventilated even in very hot conditions, to see whether you can ventilate buildings without the need for air conditioning. So it's thinking about these things from the start, so you're not having to retrofit solutions like big sort of high energy. Absolutely. I used to live in Peru, and there the Incas they used to build, because it's an earthquake zone. They used to build. They used to put rollers in the foundations of the buildings so that the wall could flex if there was a. And we're talking about, this is the Incas, thousands of years ago, with quite advanced architecture, which we're still not using today, even though the threat of earthquakes is still there. But, and also buildings that are more self-sufficient, so that harvest rainwater to supply the dirty water that they need to maintain the buildings. This is something that's very important to us. Of course, when we hosted the Olympic Games in 2012, one of the priorities at the time was that the Olympic Park that they built be as sustainable as possible, and so you'll see lots of the structures there are built to have a very light footprint on the environment, and some of them were designed to be temporary because we didn't want white elephants left behind. So that's just one example of, one early kind of example from this century, I guess, where we started to think a bit more long term about what we were building and how we were using our resources. Yeah, I think that for all of us, if we're going to tackle climate change, we have to all be convinced of the economic case for it. And there was a British economist, Nicholas Stern, who did a report a decade ago that showed that for every dollar, pound, rupee we spent now to mitigate climate change, we would save that 10 times over in the future, because if we have to respond later on, that's going to cost us a lot of money. But of course so that is an economic case, but it requires us to spend money now. Okay, so anyone who's spending their budgets now is going to go, well, I can't do that because I don't have the money for it. It's very difficult for us to think that far in the future. Human beings aren't very good at. We can sort of imagine it and we can be convinced by it at an academic level, but then we get on with our what makes sense to us now and in the next year or two. So 5-year plans, just about, 50-year plans, very difficult. Yeah, gender equality is something very important to me and to us as a government of the UK, as it should be to everybody. And very recently we advertised for applicants, women between the age of 18 and 23, to apply to be Deputy High Commissioner for a day. So across India we have 7 Deputy High Commissioners and a High Commissioner in Delhi. All of them were replaced for a day by a woman between the age of 18 and 23. And to win the chance, they had to post a video of themselves talking about gender equality. Now, of course, ideally in 20 years' time, we won't be talking about gender equality because it will just be something that's very normal. And for me personally, I have a 3-year-old daughter. I don't want her, when she grows up, to even have heard the term gender equality, because it should be normal by then. Because women shouldn't have to justify their place in offices, in other areas in sport, in other areas of life. They have the right to be there because they make up 50% of society. So for me, it's a no-brainer. It's something that we should be encouraging as much as possible. Yeah, actually most of my Christmases as an adult have been spent outside of the UK for various reasons, either because I've been travelling or because I've worked overseas. But of course a traditional Christmas back home is sitting around the table on the 25th, opening presents in the morning that we've placed under the Christmas tree, and then having roast turkey and stuffing and potatoes for lunch on the 25th. My Christmas here this year is going to be slightly different. Because we are here, and my parents are coming in January, but my mother-in-law is coming in December, and she's from Venezuela. So we're going to have a traditional Venezuelan Christmas this year.